welcome everyone to this live speaker series with Britt Turpack. Really excited to be here with Britt. This is a bit of a unique, I guess, speaker series event because it is both part of our Mental Health Awareness Month that's happening in the month of May at GitLab. And it's also kicking off a quarterly speaker series that's happening, hosted by the Learning and Development team called Collaborating with Compassion. And I think that it's a really great fit that Mental Health Awareness Month, is the first speaker event of this series. And I'm really excited to chat with Britt and talk about her experience. If you haven't been to one of these learning speaker series before, we follow the same format every time. So in a second, I'll ask Britt to introduce herself. And for the first half of the call, we'll do a fireside chat with 3 questions that you can read. They're already in the doc if you want to see the questions that I'll be asking Britt and she'll be responding to. And then once we get through those 3 questions, we'll open it up to an AMA for anybody on the call. So as we're discussing, or maybe as you're reading Britt's bio or checking out the website that's linked in there, and if you have any questions you want to ask her, you can feel free to put them in the team member questions section of the document. And at the end of the fireside chat, we'll get through as many of those questions as we can. And any that we don't get to, I'll share with Britt asynchronously and hope she can share notes on the answers via email, and I'll update you all in the document after that. I think that's all I have for my introduction. And actually, I forgot one thing, a little bit different today. After Britt introduces herself, we're going to do a short meditation before we get into the fireside chat questions. So that will be right after Britt's introduction, which I will ask her to introduce herself now. Thanks, Britt.
Thank you, Samantha. I just want to sincerely express so much gratitude to you and your whole company, everybody that is currently on this Zoom, for having me here today to discuss this important topic of mental health, which really, really is near and dear to my heart. I am a mental health advocate, educator, representative of NAMI. I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with NAMI, but it's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization, providing education, free resources, and support. So I'm going to send over all the NAMI info later that Samantha can pass out to all of you, because it is a really wonderful organization that we have. And I'm also a movement teacher. So I teach yoga and Pilates. I wear many hats. But with that being said, I want to emphasize that I am not a medical professional. I am an expert in my own lived experience, which I really do believe is a powerful piece of the puzzle. But I just want to reiterate that as we go into our discussion today. So before we get started, yes, I would like to practice a meditation. But before we do that, Samantha, can I use the chat box?
Oh, of course, if you'd like to, sure.
Yeah, so if you feel comfortable, I just want to take a second here. And how are you guys doing? If you're okay with it, I would love for you in the chat box, and you don't have to, just to identify a feeling of what's going on. Maybe you're feeling tired. Maybe you're feeling enthusiastic or inspired about something, or you're feeling creative. But I just think it's a nice stressed. Yes. You know, I am too. The irony of this month, like being in this space, is like, it's very exciting for me, but I am accounted for like every second of every day, of every hour. And I'm like, oh yeah, burnout's a real thing. But it's a nice way to connect all of us. Burnout, struggling with focus, tired, struggling with motivation, distracted, optimistic, nervous. I really appreciate these answers. And, you know, one of my favorite tools to practice specifically in the mental health space, for my mental health, for my physical health, for my emotional health, is the practice of meditation, which we are going to do together. And I'm not sure if you guys have meditated before or not. If you haven't, no worries. No stress whatsoever. I think a lot of times the misconception with meditation is that it's to eliminate thoughts, or like people think, I'm not doing it right. Those two things are wrong. Thoughts are normal. I have an active practice and they pop up all the time. It's about anchoring your awareness into something. So for example, today it will be the guide of my voice and the things that I'm saying, but it could be your breath, it could be mantra, and just shifting your focus lovingly back to that which you are focusing on, and just about slowing down and bringing your mind, body, and heart all back into the same space. So you guys got this. You're going to be so great. And regardless, you know, if you're in a chair, if you're sitting in a couch, just find a comfortable seated position. I would recommend, if you are in a chair, bring the soles of your feet to touch the ground so you feel some sort of even stability. Or maybe you're on the floor. You can totally do the floor. Love the floor. In a comfortable cross-legged seated position, or even up against a wall, if that helps you. And then with your palms in your lap, either face down or face up, whatever you prefer. Feel free, if you want to turn off your camera, if you're more comfortable with that, that works too. And then gently start to close your eyes. And before we get started here, warming up our head and neck, gently tilt your head and neck over to the right. Slowing down your breath. And just imagining expansion happening between your left ear and your left collarbone. And then come back to center, drop your chin to your chest, stretching the back of your neck. And then gently take it over to the other side, left ear falling to left shoulder without resistance. So to wherever it hits, creating space between your right ear and your right collarbone. Bring your head and neck back into a neutral position. Keep your eyes closed. And then collectively, we're going to take 3 deep breaths together. So on your next inhale, fill up the lower part of your abdomen. Visualize air coming into your ribs, running up through your chest and reaching through the crown of your head. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Open mouth, exhale. And then let's do that again. Deep, deep inhale from the lower part of your stomach. Suspend your breath for 3, 2, 1. Open mouth, exhale. And one more time, in through your nose. Imagine one long line of energy from base of spine rushing through crown of head. Hold, hold, hold. Open mouth, exhale, release, let it go. And again, keeping your eyes closed, just first bringing your focus and attention to your natural breathing pattern. So without manipulating it right now, noticing what's happening without you having to do anything. Ribs expanding, belly button contracting, pulling towards spine. And today I want to walk you guys through a meditation to release anxiety. I think we can all agree that regardless of whether or not you live with a mental health condition, we all experience stress. So many of us said it in the chat box. So no matter what is happening in your life currently, I do want you to identify one thing that's causing you worry, that's causing you fear, that's causing you anxiety, racing thoughts. Maybe it's a relationship, work or personal. Maybe it is your work. Maybe it's a lack of confidence in self. Take a deep inhale. Exhale. And then after you identify that thing, I want you to take a gentle inventory of your body. So what I mean by that is, what are you feeling right now? Do you feel expansion? Do you feel space in your head, neck, and shoulders, in your hips? Or do you feel contraction? Do you feel tightness? And if you are feeling tightness somewhere, try breathing into those spaces to create more of that expansion. The breath is so powerful. It's always with us. And even the simple technique of coming back to it is so wonderful for our mind, for our body, for our spirit. Take a really deep inhale. Open mouth, exhale. And then I want you to focus on your heart. And I want you to envision yourself in your highest good. So what I mean by that is when you are in flow, when you are in a state of ease, without whatever worry or fear it is that you identified. Maybe it's hiking a mountain. Maybe it's being on the beach, being with a loved one. But I want you to envision yourself free of that which you had identified. Holding that feeling in your body. And now I want you to think of one actionable tool, one actionable step or item that you can do in your day today, this day on Wednesday, the 11th, to work towards you in your highest good. Maybe it doesn't mean you're totally going to get there, but it's going to be a step. Take another deep inhale. Fill up from the lower part of your stomach. Hold your breath. Exhale. And as we start to wrap up this meditation, I want you to leave with the feeling of you in your highest good. Know that through your breath, through your focus and attention, you can always come back to that. And then gently bow your chin to your chest. Opening your eyes to one point on the ground, on the floor, at your knees, just trying not to look at a screen very first thing from opening your eyes, and then you can start to lift your gaze. And I thank you for all actively participating in that. That's always lovely for me as well. So I always appreciate when I get to guide people through an experience.
Thank you so much, Britt. That was really lovely, and what an awesome way to kind of all come together and start off this call. So thank you so much for leading us through that. I will move us into the questions that we have. And I'll remind everyone, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to add them to the team member question section at the bottom of the agenda. So this first one relates to the name of this speaker series. Collaboration is one of our credit values at GitLab. And I'd love to start our conversation by hearing your perspective on the connection between collaboration and our individual well-being.
That's such a great question. Thank you. I think both collaboration and individual well-being are so powerful, and together, well, when focus is on individual well-being, people can really come together in collaboration. But something that I think that is necessary for that to happen is a similar value system. And when I say a similar value system, I don't necessarily mean that people always have to be in agreement with one another. I actually think differences should be celebrated. But within differences, there needs to be this philosophy or idea of staying open and open to one's individual well-being. And when that openness occurs, you can have two people or two ideas that come together. And, you know, whether it's personal, like for example, in let's use mental health, for example. You have somebody personally, two different people that are going through mental health conditions, and maybe their recovery looks different. So one person has more of a holistic background, the meditation, the acupuncture, the diet and nutrition, and one person has the Western medicine, more pharmaceutical approach. It's being open to the idea that both can work. And then in a professional setting, like you have a problem that you guys need to solve and you have two differences in opinions, it's coming together to meet in the middle, because I think essentially that's what it is all about. And when that meeting in the middle happens, it pushes the needle forward. And that happens in work and it happens in personal life. And really, if you think about it, that's kind of how change happens in general in our world.
Yeah, thanks for that, Britt. I think like at the beginning of your response, you said like a similar value system is really important for this kind of collaboration to happen and how well-being is integrated in there. And in my own experience, I find that our GitLab values really are like a cohesive way that teams collaborate together. And so I think we're pretty lucky to have that system in place so that we can make time for our own well-being within the work that we're doing. So thanks for calling that out.
Right. Of course. And then when you do focus on the individual well-being, you can show up to the table in the space of collaboration as the best version of yourself and really make an impact, make a positive impact. But that also takes the person from the empowered position to be like, no, I am going to put my well-being first. And maybe that well-being is self-care practices, or maybe that well-being is setting boundaries. But then it actually helps everybody in the whole.
Yeah, that's great. Showing up as our best selves so that we can contribute and be able to contribute well. I love that. So the second question that I have for you, and we were kind of just chatting before we got started about how GitLab is an all remote company and how we're distributed across more than 60 countries. And we have our own unique challenges when it comes to communicating and building relationships. And so I'd love if you can speak specifically for an all remote work environment. What are some behavioral or emotional signals that we can look for both in ourselves and in others that might indicate we need to talk about and take care of our mental health?
Thank you again for that question as well. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm not a medical professional. However, I have been trained under NAMI to identify these specific behavioral, I guess you could say, warnings. Definitely isolation. And isolation can look different for everybody. Avoidance. A lot of times, I know I live with anxiety and depression, and in the height of my anxiety, avoidance was definitely one of the things that showed up for me. And what's so interesting is like, I'm 5'8", I have a bubbly personality. I always have. So people are under, blonde, chatty, whatever. People are under the assumption, they look at me and they're like, oh no, she's fine. And I played into that role of like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. But really I was the furthest thing from fine. So just, different avoidant behaviors. If it's hard because you guys are all separated, but just checking in on people, I think is really important. And that's not something to look out for, but that's something to actively practice and to ask people how they're doing. I think it's really wonderful that you guys are everywhere, but also the fact that we're on screens can make people feel really alone. And in my experience, people just want to feel seen and heard. more than anything else. What other behavioral? So coming from the suicide side of the mental health issue, which I know is like a really heavy topic, warning signs typically involve people giving away things, or, and it doesn't just have to be like physical things, but it can be like physical items, but it can be digitally translated as well. So that's just something, even in conversation, if someone's like, yeah, I'm starting to just like give this to this X person, just to be mindful and aware. And then emotionally, like, don't make assumptions. And I think I kind of hit on this when I was just talking about my own personal experience. Like, just as a reminder, you guys never know what someone is going through. None of us do. And just to be kind, to not make assumptions, and just keep your side of the street clean. And I know this isn't just a personal environment, it's a work environment as well. So certain responsibilities need to be met and whatnot. But yeah, just to stay in your lane and to do what you can to be the best team member.
Right now, I'm leading a group of team members through a training called Crucial Conversations. And one of the most recent topics that we discussed was being aware of your intent when you're having conversations with others, and how that changes as your own emotions come up and change the conversation. And I feel like a lot of what you're saying, especially around checking in with each other and not assuming that we know the experiences that other people are going through, really relates to that, being aware of our intent in conversations. We even have a sub value at GitLab that's one of my favorites. It's called assume positive intent. And I think that really plays in here as we're having conversations that might feel difficult to breach about team members' mental health. Being able to not make assumptions about the experiences that they're having, and give them space, create space for dialogue for others to share their experiences.
Yes, and to piggyback off of that, in that space of creating space to allow people to share experiences, not to jump in and give opinion or advice. Oftentimes people just I facilitate these peer support groups, and a lot of times people just want to share. It's like, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to hear your opinion on this, but I do need to get this out. And something that I know that comes up a lot is the willingness to admit that you may not be okay, or that you do need help. And this seems like a very supportive environment, which I'm sure you guys can all acknowledge. But a lot of times that's the hardest part, to put your hands up in the air and surrender and be like, I'm actually not fine.
Yeah, and that's really hard. You really have to be in a safe space to be willing to do that. So that can be really difficult. Thanks for that. I'll do one more reminder. If you have any questions for Britt, I'm about to ask her my last question. So please put them in the agenda and we'll go through those now.
I love questions, by the way. So ask me anything.
Great. Okay, so this last question, building a personal mental health care toolkit is a practice that you teach for stress and burnout management. And so I'd love to talk about what is a mental health care toolkit. And can you speak about how team members can identify effective skills and resources that they can put in this toolkit?
Totally. And this is one of my most favorite things to talk about. So, but before I discuss what a mental health toolkit is, let's discuss why. Like I mentioned earlier, we all experience stress and anxiety. And I think that's kind of an understood concept and idea here. And I always describe life as being like a wave. Like when you wake up in the morning, we all get hit with some wave. It's like we're all surfing, but we just don't know what wave we're going to get. So often that's out of our control. But the one thing that we can control is ourselves and our response to situations. And I just think a mental health toolkit is so great because it helps set you up for success. So you can handle whatever wave you get that day or whatever life throws at you. And I know from my experience, when I am really anxious or I have something going on that's creating me a lot of fear or anxiety, I can't always think clearly to identify what I need to do for myself. So if a toolkit is already in place, then you can pull it out of your back pocket in those moments of need, being like, I may not feel my best right now, but I know the things or I know the steps that I can do to try to help me feel better. And so for me, my mental health toolkit translates into my morning routine, which I live by. It is the anchor for my day. And I wake up very early. And the first thing I do every single morning before I look at a screen, before I look at a phone, talk to anybody, is I make my bed. I know that sounds silly, but completing a task upon waking first thing in the morning is so great for your subconscious mind, starting and finishing. But after I do that, I sit down for my meditation. And I do practice for 20 minutes every single day, which I know can seem kind of daunting. But scientifically, meditation is not, you don't necessarily see the benefits from it in the length of time, but you do in the consistency and repetition. So if you even sat down every single morning, just for a minute, for 2 minutes, for 3 minutes, you would see the increased memory. You would see the delayed reaction and more of a response. You would see the more peace, the more ease. You would see all of these things, the being in the present moment, just in the repetition and consistency of it. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is I have an active gratitude practice that I put pen to paper. And I actually write out 3 different things that I'm grateful for. And pen to paper is so wonderful because it actually uses a higher version of your subconscious mind instead of just like texting or verbally stating out loud. And I do it every single day. And then after that, I have movement in my life, physical movement. And 30 minutes of exercise. If you can't do 30 minutes, even a 10-minute walk, a yoga practice. There's so many great resources online on YouTube. Honestly, sometimes what I do first thing in the morning is I put headphones in or turn my speakers on, depending on how early it is, and just dance and move. And movement is so wonderful because it actually gets you out of one space and into another. And when our emotions, they get built up in our body. And when we don't move, when we don't physically move or we don't move with our breath, it creates stagnant. And that's just, that's actually how physical ailments come up. That's where the anxiety arises. That's where the depression is. So those are the 3 things that are my go-to that I do every single day. But then I have check-ins throughout the day as well. Just stepping outside on my balcony and getting some fresh air, going in nature, going for a 10-minute walk, journaling, listening to music, cooking. There are so many wonderful positive coping strategies. And in the mental health space, positive coping strategies are just healthy ways to manage stress. So just know what works for you. And I think it's also important, not only know what works for you, but know that that can change. Like you don't have to be, tied down to whatever it is that you come up with for your mental health toolkit. This week it could look one way, but maybe next week it's different, and that fluidity is okay.
Thanks for sharing. I really oh, go ahead.
No, I just saw, is this the commencement speech, the Navy SEAL about making the bed every morning? Yes, it's so good. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that building some structure into the morning. And I also really like the call out about building in breaks throughout the day, because I think that at GitLab, working remotely without other team members around us, there is some responsibility to control your workspace so that there are some sort of reminder to get away from your computer. I was on a coffee chat with a team member a few days ago, and She met with a mental health coach through Modern Health, which is a benefit that our team members can use. And she shared that she keeps like this rock near her. And she's decided that like when I look at that rock, I say out loud something I'm grateful for. And it's like a physical reminder in her workspace that when she happens to glance, you know, over here to the rock, that's what she does. And without being in an office building where people walk by, say, hey, Britt, you want to go on a quick walk? Hey, Sean, you want to go grab lunch? Like, especially if you live on your own, there's no one necessarily to do that. And so being intentional about building in those things into your day with a rock on the desk or a calendar reminder every day at 10 o'clock that's going to tell you to do something, I think is really applicable.
I love that you mentioned that, because the way to build a habit is, I think it's called like cue, action, reward. So whatever the action is that you are trying to accomplish, maybe it is coming back to your breath, or maybe it's the affirmation. What is the cue that's going to set you up for that? Maybe it's looking at the rock. Maybe it's setting the calendar reminder. Maybe when you wake up, it's the bed or the brushing your teeth. And then you do the action, and then you give yourself a reward. So for me, after I do all of those things, it's my coffee. So I can get my coffee, get my day, because I love my coffee. But yeah, just navigating and figuring out what works for you so you can actually make it happen.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. Cool conversation going on in the chat too. Well, thanks for that.
Yes, the power of habit. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, set aside, which I know this sounds, and you just mentioned it, take 5 minutes. I'm sure it would be fine. And just shut the computer screen, shut the phone, and just like step away. Or maybe it's your lunchtime. You're on the screen all day. Intentionally have your lunch without the screen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, they seem elementary, like these concepts, but they're actually so effective.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of autonomy in our schedules at GitLab. And if you are new to GitLab or you aren't and you haven't read about the nonlinear workday, I really suggest checking it out in the handbook. And I'll find a link and share it after, because that structure empowers us at GitLab to make time for this, because it's important to be taking care of ourselves so that, like we talked about at the start of this call, we can collaborate with each other. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, that's going to start to influence our collaboration and our ability to really show up here over time. Oh, Sonia.
This is Sonia. I just wanted to, so I started with GitLab early March. And so it's very interesting to have like read the handbook before I started, and continue to go through the onboarding and reading more of the handbook, and then seeing how some departments actually function where it is much more less async than I think culturally we're striving for. So I think there's just a balance that we somehow have to find, where it is an async company, but especially working like in GNA, right? If there are a lot of people that are in the US on the West Coast, it's kind of like, oh, I need this right now, right? So it's definitely like trying to strike a balance between what we speak of culturally and then what we actually see in action and what people are asking us for.
Thanks for calling that out, Sonia. So important too, because how easy is it to quickly message someone who's working in the same time zone as you in a Slack DM to get done what you need to get done? But is it transparent? Is that supporting team members who are in, 10 hours later than you, that are going to sign on and need to know what's going on? And so really thinking, am I working in a async and transparent way so that other people can do their best job at GitLab too? So thanks for sharing that.
And someone who works for me right now is taking a nap with her toddler, which I think is great, right? So I just want it would be great if everybody would have the ability to do something like that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sonia. So we have about 10 minutes left. and we have a couple questions from team members. So I'm gonna switch us over to those questions. There's no name on this first one, but I think I saw Wendy typing it, and I'm not sure if she's still here and wants to voice it.
I am here. Thank you. I was just curious. I think, Britt, you started to say about being kind with colleagues and your own lane. And I'd love to hear you expand a little bit more on that. We at GitLab, our mission is everyone can contribute, which is amazing in so many aspects. But I think sometimes there can be some challenges with that. So I'll leave it there for you to expand.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for that question. I think staying in our own lane and keeping our side of the street clean is so essential for our own well-being, but like I said, the well-being of everybody else, because it comes back to this idea of not making assumptions from my experience. And trust me, I'm sure like in working with people, it can be really frustrating if tasks need to be done and they're not, or maybe deadlines are not being met, but really just doing what you can, because when you do what you can and you do it from a place of love, as hippy dippy as that sounds, so just stay with me. I really do believe the most effective outcome occurs. Because when we get into this reactive behavior or we get into anger and then we start, lashing out at somebody, really the only person that it does affect negatively, it may affect everybody negatively on a whole, but it comes back to ourselves. So I think as long as you appropriately set boundaries and you are able to articulate needs and communicate effectively, which I know is sometimes really difficult to do, knowing that you are showing up, coming back to that theme as the best version of yourself, doing what you're supposed to do. It's surrender. It's taking your hands off the wheel and being at a certain point, I can only do so much. Did that answer your question?
I appreciate it. It's probably a question more for a deeper dive into our values or sub-values of potentially challenges that team members can face from a mental health perspective that are not intended to be challenges. And I'd be curious for others to weigh in there of just when sometimes we all contribute or we all can be in others' lanes, it can create unintended challenges for people to get a work product across the line.
Can you further, I'm just curious, if you don't mind, can you give me a specific example, even if it's a hypothetical one?
Hypothetical. I would just say, we've got lots of great ideas and great input, and we allow for input on everything, which is amazing. It's super, super great. But I think sometimes for the DRI, and I've had team members tell me this, it can feel deflating or challenging because a project tends to take much longer to go forward.
That's where I think there is a fine balance, because that's where this is difficult, because certain responsibilities need to be met. So I don't actually necessarily know if I have an answer for you, because I think a lot of the information that I do share and that I have talked about specifically this afternoon is necessary, but it's also within a structure of responsibility.
I learned that, I guess I've never lived there and worked there in business, but in Europe, they kind of do everything by committee and by consensus. So decision-making takes a lot longer. So whereas I think here in the US, it's more there's someone directly responsible and they make the decision to execute, and this happens faster. Whereas so I think is that where you're kind of getting at, Wendy? Maybe this consensus on kind of everything kind of slows down the ability to execute and get things done?
Well, and I don't know if it's necessarily consensus, because at the end of the day, our DRIs, are the DRIs. I think it's more, and Britt, thank you for taking this question. It's probably a great internal AMA to have, or not an AMA, but just dialogue to have, because I think there's something there where it's transparency is amazing. Our values are amazing. It's like no other organization in the world. And of course, I'm a little bit biased, but then like everyone can contribute, which is super, super great. But then you can have these unintended consequences of, oh, I'm deflated. I feel really down. I'm the DRI. I thought this was there. Everyone's come into my doc, and now I'm back at day one, and I've got to then go figure out how to fix this and put it forward. So I think that's kind of where I'm going. And I don't know if it resonates with people here on this video or Zoom, but it certainly is something I've heard from team members.
This is really interesting to bring up as well, Wendy, not to keep going back to Crucial Conversations, but in Crucial Conversations last week, the other side of that as well, the mission and the idea that everyone can contribute, but how that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to or should contribute to everything, I think can also cause almost like decision fatigue. Like there's so many things I can contribute to, but I don't have time to contribute to everything and do my job, but I can. So am I expected to? And like kind of this whole conversation you have in your head when you're deciding what to contribute to and why. I'd love to continue this conversation with an AMA format internally and hear more. Thanks for asking.
Can I just add one thing to it too?
Sure, thanks, Britt.
And this is kind of like a parallel to it. It's not exactly directly connected to this, but it's almost like this idea of saying no. When you mentioned the decision fatigue, like I think most people are always like, have to say yes, have to say yes, have to say yes. But like a no can also be loving, or in terms of this, like taking a pause or taking a step back can also be effective. So it doesn't just have to be like produce. And I would just say, this is also where the meditation comes in. It's like, maybe you don't have time to meditate, but like place one hand on your heart, one hand on your stomach, so you can come back to your breath and actually take a moment to reflect before you answer, before you like respond to an email, before you share a million ideas or expect a response.
Yeah, great. Thanks for bringing it back to that, Britt. I think that's a really important piece of this. We have just about 2 minutes left, and there's one more question. So if Julie's still on the call, I'm going to ask them to voice it and see if we can get a quick response before we wrap up.
Sure. So when trying to prevent burnout or trying to recover from it, self-care activities are often talked about as being important. As someone who in a previous job was burned out, I found it hard to sort of identify really good self-care activities for myself. And so I wondered if you had any advice on helping us to identify such activities.
Hi, Julie. I would say it's so personal. Like the self-care activities that I mentioned, I know are my go-tos and work for me, but to just try a bunch of different practices and then take inventory or reflect after to see if they helped you or to see if they work, but also not to have the expectation that it's necessarily going to fix the burnout. It's like, these are small things that you can do that maybe if you're feeling anxious, you're feeling up here, it takes you down a little, but to not set the expectation that it's going to like just solve everything and make you feel 100% better. And then when you readjust that perspective, it kind of allows you to let it sink in and see if it works or if it doesn't.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that like non-attachment piece too. not being attached to an outcome and being
Yeah.
open to what the outcome actually is. Thanks so much for that, Britt. Well, we're just at time and there's no more questions. Mike, I think I've captured all of the links that were shared, but if anyone else comes up with links over the next, couple hours or so, and they want to drop them in the doc to share with everyone else, please feel free to do so. I'm excited to capture this chat because I haven't really been able to keep up with it while we've been talking, but looking forward to reading it again once the recording processes. I want to thank you all for being here and taking time to be part of this discussion. I want to thank Britt for taking time to be here with us and to help lead us in this really great meditation and conversation about mental health and how it works in our GitLab community. As a reminder for team members, this is part of a quarterly long speaker series that will go through the next few months and also part of Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a really great post from Wendy in the company FYI channel that highlights other initiatives and resources that we are calling out during Mental Health Awareness Month. So if you haven't seen it yet, go check that out in Slack. You also got an emailed newsletter. If you prefer email, you can search for Mental Health Awareness Month and it will pop up there. But yeah, thank you again so much for being here, Britt. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. I hope you all have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, and I'll talk to you soon.